The lost girl's suffering. The jungle was alive with the sound of insects and strange creatures. Tall trees reached for the sky, their twisted branches blocking out most of the sunlight. Thick vines curled around broken stones, the ruins of an ancient civilization long forgotten. But in the center of a small clearing, a terrible scene was unfolding. A young alien girl was tied to a tall wooden pole. Her skin was pale blue, her large golden eyes filled with terror. Her clothes were torn, her body covered in bruises. She was weak, barely able to lift her head. The rope around her wrists cut deep into her flesh, and she winced every time she moved. Around her, the tribal aliens danced in circles, chanting in a strange, guttural language. They were tall, muscular beings with dark red skin and bone masks covering their faces. Some carried spears tipped with sharpened stones, while others had war drums slung over their backs. Their eyes burned with cruel excitement. The girl trembled as she looked at the fire pit beneath her. Smoke curled into the air, carrying the scent of burnt wood. The ground was stained with dark patches, the remains of past victims. These creatures were not just savages. They were killers. The leader of the tribe, a towering brute with deep scars across his chest, stepped forward. He raised a gleaming obsidian dagger, pointing it at the girl's throat. She must be sacrificed. He growled in his own language. The gods demanded. The tribe cheered wildly. The girl tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Her lips trembled as she gasped, "Please, help me." But there was no one to hear her. Or so she thought. A shadow in the jungle, not far from the clearing, hidden in the thick foliage, a human watched in silence. He had been tracking these aliens for days, moving carefully through the jungle, learning their movements. He had seen their cruelty, their savage ways. But this time, it was different. This time, they had taken a child. His name was Captain Daniel Reeves, a soldier from the United Earth Marine Corps. His mission was simple: survive. His ship had crash-landed on this hostile planet weeks ago, leaving him stranded. With only his rifle, knife, and combat skills, he had managed to stay alive. But now, as he crouched behind the leaves, gripping his weapon, he felt his heartbeat quicken. The girl was terrified, helpless, and Reeves knew, if he didn't act now, she would die. He adjusted the scope on his M7 tactical rifle, lining up a shot. One bullet. That was all it would take to kill the tribal leader. But the moment he fired, the entire village would come after him. He didn't have backup. He was alone. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. He couldn't just watch. He had to do something. The ritual begins. The tribal leader raised his dagger high, the firelight glinting off the blade. The chants grew louder, the drumming faster. The girl squeezed her eyes shut. She knew the end was near. Reeves exhaled. His finger rested on the trigger. Then, boom! A shot rang through the jungle. The leader's head snapped back, his body collapsing to the ground. For a moment, there was silence. Then, chaos erupted. The tribesmen roared in fury, grabbing their weapons, searching for the attacker. But Reeves was already on the move. He dashed from the underbrush, his rifle blazing. 1, 2, 3. He dropped 3 warriors before they even knew what hit them. He reached the girl in seconds, slashing through the ropes with his combat knife. She collapsed into his arms, weak and barely conscious. "I got you," he whispered. But before he could move, a deep, thunderous war horn echoed through the jungle. More were coming, hundreds of them. Reeves looked down at the girl. She was too weak to run. And now, the entire tribe was after them. Cliffhanger, nowhere to run. The soldier's grip tightened on his rifle. He had saved her, but could he save himself? The jungle trembled with the sound of stomping feet, battle cries, and rage. Reeves took a deep breath. This wasn't over. The brutal rescue. The jungle exploded with noise. Screams of rage and confusion, filled the air as the tribal aliens scrambled to find the unseen attacker. The crack of gunfire had shattered their ritual, and now their leader lay dead at their feet, his lifeless eyes staring into the fire. For a brief moment, there was silence, a stunned hesitation as they looked around. Then, reality struck them like a thunderclap. They were under attack. The warriors roared, lifting their spears and axes, their bone masks turning toward the trees. They had been the hunters, but now they were the prey. A soldier in the darkness. Reeves didn't wait. He moved like a ghost, his combat boots barely making a sound on the damp earth. He had trained for missions like this. Extraction under fire, enemy territory, no backup. But never had he saved someone like this. He could hear the alien girl's ragged breathing as she lay slumped against the wooden pole. She was weak, wounded, terrified. Reeves wasn't sure if she even understood what was happening, but he knew one thing. If he didn't get her out now, she was dead. His rifle swung up again. Another shot. Another enemy down. The alien warrior crumpled to the ground, his spear falling uselessly from his fingers. Then another. And another. But the moment of advantage was fading fast. The element of surprise was gone. From the other side of the clearing, a massive war horn bellowed through the jungle, shaking the very trees. Reinforcements were coming. Reeves felt the air shift. Time was running out. The girl who couldn't run. Slashing his combat knife through the thick ropes, Reeves caught the girl before she collapsed completely. Her body was lighter than he expected. Malnourished, she must have been in this hell for days. Golden eyes, huge, luminous, filled with both fear and confusion, stared up at him. She didn't speak. She just stared. "Can you walk?" Reeves asked, his voice low but firm. Nothing. Her breathing was shallow. She wasn't just afraid. She was broken. The realization hit him like a bullet. Even if she wanted to run, she couldn't. Behind him, a deep voice screamed in fury. He turned just in time to see a warrior charging straight at them, spear raised high. Blood in the moonlight. No time to think. Reeves moved on pure instinct. He ducked low, dodging the spear's tip by inches, feeling the rush of wind as it sliced through the air above his head. In the same breath, he twisted his knife upward, plunging it into the warrior's exposed ribs. A sickening crunch. The alien choked on his own breath, collapsing into the dirt, his fingers still twitching around his weapon. Reeves yanked his blade free. No hesitation. No second thoughts. He turned back to the girl. She hadn't moved. Damn it. He didn't have time for this. With a frustrated breath, Reeves scooped her up into his arms and turned toward the jungle. Then, a second war horn. And this time, the ground trembled with the sound of dozens of feet. The chase begins. They were coming. Reeves bolted into the jungle. The alien girl clutched tightly in his arms. The dense trees and vines blurred past him, branches slashing at his skin as he pushed forward. Behind him, the thunder of pursuit grew louder. The tribal aliens were faster, stronger. This was their world. But Reeves had something they didn't. Training. He moved like a shadow, weaving through the undergrowth, staying low, using the jungle itself as cover. Still, he could hear them. Close. Too close. The girl stirred weakly in his grip, whispering something in a language he didn't understand. "It's okay," he muttered, though he wasn't sure if it was a lie. His lungs burned. His muscles screamed for rest. But stopping wasn't an option. Suddenly, up ahead, a massive stone structure. It loomed in the moonlight, ancient, covered in vines, half buried in the jungle. A ruin. A hiding place. A last chance. Reeves didn't hesitate. He ran straight toward it. The chase through the jungle. The jungle was alive with sound, shouts of war, the clash of weapons, and the heavy pounding of feet against damp earth. The air was thick with the scent of sweat, blood, and burning wood. Captain Daniel Reeves pressed his back against the cold stone wall of the ruin, his pulse hammering in his ears. The alien girl trembled in his arms, her small fingers clutching at his torn uniform. Outside, the tribal warriors prowled, their guttural voices speaking in an ancient tongue. They weren't leaving. They were searching, hunting. One wrong move, one sound, and it would all be over. Nowhere left to run. Reeves could hear the crack of branches as the warriors spread out. They knew this jungle better than he did. They were patient. They would wait him out. He glanced down at the girl. She was barely conscious, her breathing uneven. Her skin was damp with sweat, and there were fresh bruises forming along her arms. She wouldn't last long. They had to move. Reeves scanned the ruins. The massive stone structure was old, ancient. Time and nature had swallowed it. Vines creeping over broken pillars, moss covering faded carvings. The entrance was just a narrow crack between collapsed walls, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. If he could find another way out. A sharp sound cut through the air. A clink. A rattle. Reeves stiffened. One of the warriors was inside. The hunter enters. He pressed the girl deeper into the shadows, raising his M7 tactical rifle. The low glow of his scope illuminated the darkness, casting eerie shadows across the crumbling stone. Then, movement. A silhouette emerged through the ruins. A towering figure, broad shoulders, and a mask of bone covering its face. The warrior's eyes glowed faintly under the moonlight. It was listening, sniffing the air. It knew they were there. Reeves didn't breathe. He could feel the alien girl's heartbeat, fast and frantic, against his arm. She was afraid. So was he. Then, the warrior turned its head slightly. And for one terrible moment, it seemed to look directly at them. Reeves' finger tightened on the trigger. Silent kill. The warrior took one slow step forward, then another. Reeves moved fast. One clean shot, silent and deadly. The warrior jerked, stumbled forward, then collapsed face first into the dirt, a single bullet hole between its eyes. Reeves exhaled. But outside, the shouts of other warriors grew louder. They had heard the body fall. And now they were coming. The race through darkness. Reeves hoisted the girl into his arms again, ignoring the ache in his muscles. He ran. Out of the ruins. Into the jungle. Straight into the unknown. Branches slashed at his skin. Vines curled around his boots, trying to slow him down. The humid air burned his lungs. Behind him, the warriors gave chase. They were fast. Too fast. Reeves ducked under a fallen tree, barely avoiding a spear that flew past his head. It slammed into a tree trunk, the impact shaking the ground. Another spear, this time closer. Too close. The girl in his arms whimpered, her golden eyes barely open. Just a little more, Reeves muttered, but he didn't know if that was a lie. The cliffside trap then. The ground changed beneath his feet. The jungle opened up, and Reeves skidded to a stop. Ahead of him was a cliff, a sheer drop into darkness. A river rushed far below, white foam crashing against jagged rocks. Too high to jump, too dangerous to climb. He was trapped. And behind him, the warriors appeared from the trees, forming a tight semicircle. Their glowing eyes locked onto him, their weapons raised. They didn't charge. They didn't need to. They had him exactly where they wanted. The biggest warrior stepped forward, his armor gleaming under the moonlight. He was taller than the rest, broader, more dangerous. He pointed his massive axe at Reeves. "You die here, human." The last bullet. Reeves was breathing hard. He glanced at the girl. She was watching the warriors, her expression unreadable. His rifle was almost empty. One bullet left. One shot. Not enough to kill all of them. But maybe, just maybe, enough to change the game. Reeves slowly raised his rifle. The warriors tensed, ready to strike. Then, A loud screech echoed through the sky. A shadow passed overhead. Something was coming. Something big, trapped like prey. The jungle was never silent. It was a living, breathing thing, filled with rustling leaves, distant calls of unknown creatures, and the hum of unseen dangers. But now, as Reeves stood on the edge of the cliff, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The tribal warriors had stopped moving. Their weapons were still raised, their glowing eyes locked onto him, but they weren't attacking. Not anymore. Because something else had entered the hunt. Something bigger. Something deadlier. A shadow passed over the jungle. Massive. Unnatural. Reeves felt the alien girl tense in his arms. Her golden eyes widened in fear. She knew what was coming. And so did the warriors. One of them muttered something in their guttural language. The leader, the massive brute with the gleaming axe, growled a single word in response. A name. A warning. The Night Maw. The monster awakens. From deep within the jungle, a terrible sound rose into the night. A low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the trees. It was like thunder trapped inside a beast's throat. Then came the sound of trees snapping. Branches breaking like brittle bones. Something huge was moving toward them, and it was getting closer. Reeves tightened his grip on his M7 rifle, his last bullet still chambered. He didn't know what was coming, but his instincts screamed one thing. Run. But there was nowhere to go. The cliff's edge was behind him. A sheer drop into the violent river below. The tribal warriors were in front of him, armed, blocking his only path. And now, from the jungle itself, something ancient and monstrous was coming. He had never been this trapped before. The alien girl whimpered. And then, the Night Maw arrived. A nightmare made flesh. A hulking form emerged from the darkness. It was twice the size of the largest warrior and covered in thick, obsidian-black scales that absorbed the moonlight. Its body was a fusion of muscle and unnatural bone, spikes running down its spine like jagged blades. But its face was the worst part. It had no eyes, only a wide gaping maw filled with rows of rotating teeth, like a grinder made of bone. It breathed in sharply, sniffing the air, searching. And then, suddenly, it turned toward Reeves. It could smell him, smell the girl, and it was hungry. The warriors' plan. For a moment, Reeves thought the tribal warriors would run. But they didn't. Instead, the leader of the warriors raised his massive axe, pointing it not at the Night Maw, but at Reeves. It hit him like a punch to the gut. They weren't going to fight the beast. They were going to use it. Let the Night Maw take care of the intruder. Reeves cursed under his breath. If that thing got any closer, it wouldn't just kill him, it would rip him apart. He had to act. Now. The gamble. Reeves shifted his stance, adjusting his grip on the girl. She was still too weak to run. His rifle. One bullet left. His combat knife, useless against something that big. His surroundings, nowhere to hide. His options. One insane, reckless, last-ditch plan. He turned back toward the cliff's edge. The river below was angry and wild, crashing against jagged rocks. The drop was easily 100 feet. A bad fall would kill them instantly. A good fall would probably still kill them. But the Night Maw wouldn't leave anything left to bury, and Reeves wasn't about to let that happen. The leap of faith. The warriors started advancing. The Night Maw inhaled deeply, opening its terrible mouth wider. It was going to strike. Reeves felt every muscle in his body tighten. He took one last look at the girl. She was watching him now, her golden eyes searching his face. She wasn't afraid anymore. She trusted him. So he whispered, "Hold on." And then, he jumped. The fall into darkness. The wind tore at him as he plunged into the abyss. The roar of the river grew louder, deafening. The air was a blur of twisting vines, jagged rocks, and the unforgiving rush of white water. He wrapped himself tighter around the girl, shielding her. And then, impact. The world shattered into a whirlpool of freezing water. The force ripped him away from the girl. His lungs burned. His body spun violently, tumbling through the rapids. The river was trying to swallow him whole. For a few terrifying moments, he didn't know which way was up. Darkness, silence, cold, and then his head broke the surface. The aftermath. Reeves gasped, coughing up water as the river carried him forward. He fought to keep himself afloat, scanning frantically. Where was she? Where was the girl? Panic twisted in his chest. The water was too wild, too fast. If she had gone under, she wouldn't last long. Then, a flash of gold. He turned just in time to see her, barely above the surface, struggling, too weak to fight the current. No. With the last of his strength, Reeves pushed through the water, lunging toward her. His fingers closed around her arm, and he pulled her to him. She coughed weakly, but she was alive. Relief crashed into him like a tidal wave. But then he looked ahead and saw what was waiting downstream. The warrior versus the beast. The world rushed past in a blur of water, rocks, and chaos. Captain Daniel Reeves had faced death many times. He had fought in wars, survived ambushes, escaped burning wreckage. But nothing had prepared him for being thrown down a raging waterfall with an alien girl in his arms. The river screamed as it plunged off the edge, carrying them with it. Reeves barely had time to take a breath before the world dropped out beneath them. And then, they fell. The plunge into darkness. The air rushed past his ears. Wind tore at his skin. The weightless feeling lasted only a second, but it felt like an eternity. Then, impact. The water slammed into him like concrete. His world became a swirl of bubbles and pressure. Everything was dark, cold, silent. Reeves fought to orient himself, kicking his legs, reaching out blindly in the blackness. He could feel the river's force dragging him deeper. His lungs screamed for air. Where was the girl? Then, a flash of gold. He saw her floating limply in the water, stinking. No. With a powerful stroke, he surged forward, his fingers closing around her arm. She wasn't moving. Unconscious. Reeves wrapped his arm around her and kicked hard toward the surface. His vision blurred, his chest burned. And then, air. His head broke through the surface, gasping. But the river wasn't done with them yet. A new kind of hell. The current snatched them like a predator. Reeves barely had time to hold the girl's head above water before they were pulled downstream. The river twisted and roared, slamming them against jagged rocks. Every hit was a fresh explosion of pain. Reeves gritted his teeth, wrapping both arms around the girl, trying to shield her from the worst of it. But his strength was fading. If he didn't find a way out soon, the river would take them both. Then, through the mist and chaos, a chance. A fallen tree, half submerged, wedged between two boulders. A natural lifeline. Reeves kicked with everything he had left. The tree rushed toward him. At the last second, he reached out. His fingers scraped the rough bark, slipping, sliding. Then, they caught hold. Pain exploded in his shoulder as his body jerked violently to a stop. The force nearly tore his grip loose, but he held on. With a final heave, he hauled himself and the girl onto the tree. They were alive, but barely. The aftermath. For a long moment, Reeves just lay there, coughing up water. His whole body ached. Every inch of him was covered in bruises and cuts. But they had survived. He turned his head, heart pounding. The alien girl lay beside him, motionless. A spike of fear shot through him. He pulled himself up, shaking, reaching out to check her pulse. Then she coughed. A small, weak sound. Her eyes fluttered open. Reeves felt relief crash into him like a wave. "You're okay," he muttered. "You're okay." She just stared at him, dazed. Then, softly, she whispered something. It wasn't English, but Reeves understood. She had said, "Thank you." The true enemy arrives. Reeves let his head fall back against the tree, exhaustion settling in. But something was wrong. The jungle had fallen completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. Reeves sat up, muscles tensing, instincts screaming. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, slow, measured. He turned his head toward the riverbank. And there, standing in the mist, was a warrior, but not just any warrior. The leader. The same massive, axe-wielding brute who had hunted them before. He was drenched, covered in blood and mud, but very much alive. And he was smiling. The duel. Reeves slowly stood, his body protesting every movement. The warrior tilted his head, amused. "You fight well, human," he said in a deep, guttural voice. Reeves didn't answer. He was too busy thinking. His gun was gone. His knife was missing. No weapons, no backup, only his bare hands. The warrior raised his massive obsidian axe, resting it against his shoulder. "This time," he said, "you die properly." Then he attacked. The fight for survival. The first strike came fast, faster than a man that size should have been able to move. Reeves rolled aside, barely dodging as the axe splintered the tree where he had been standing. The force shook the ground. The warrior turned, swinging again. Reeves ducked, too slow. The blade skimmed his shoulder, ripping his uniform, drawing blood. Pain flared, but he pushed it down. He couldn't afford to slow down. He had to get inside the warrior's reach. Ducking low, he lunged forward, slamming a fist into the warrior's ribs. It was like hitting stone. The warrior barely flinched. Then, a fist like a battering ram smashed into Reeves' chest. He staggered back, gasping, vision spinning. The warrior laughed. "Not strong enough," he mocked. Reeves wiped blood from his lip. Then, through the pain, he grinned. "Try again," he muttered. The warrior's eyes flashed with fury. And the real fight began. The girl's hidden power. A fight to the death. Reeves staggers backward, chest heaving. The alien warrior closes in, brandishing a massive axe with bloodlust in his eyes. The jungle ruins around them blur as Reeves struggles to stay on his feet. He has no weapon, only raw willpower and the adrenaline pounding in his veins. The warrior lunges with a guttural roar. Reeves ducks and rolls aside, just as the lethal axe slams into the ground where he stood a heartbeat ago. Dirt and shattered stone explode upward. Reeves shields his face from the spray, then scrambles up again. His muscles scream in protest, exhaustion threatening to drag him down. Strike after strike, Reeves narrowly evades the blade's deadly arc. Each swing cuts the air with a vicious whoosh, missing him by inches. The warrior is relentless, pressing forward and corralling Reeves against a broken stone wall. Reeves' breath comes in ragged gasps, and his vision swims with sweat. He can't keep this up much longer. In a desperate burst of effort, Reeves feints left then dives right, aiming a kick at the warrior's knee. It connects with a dull crack, making the alien grunt and falter. But the victory is fleeting. The warrior recovers almost instantly and backhands Reeves with an armored fist. Pain explodes across Reeves' jaw. He tumbles to the ground, head ringing. Before Reeves can scramble away, a heavy boot stomps down on his chest, pinning him to the earth. The warrior looms above, lips peeled back in a triumphant snarl as he raises the axe high. Reeves strains against the foot crushing his ribs. But he's trapped. Hot blood trickles from a cut on his brow into his eye. He blinks it away, refusing to look anywhere but up at his enemy. This can't be the end. Not like this. Time slows to a crawl. The warrior growls something in his guttural language and tightens his grip on the axe handle. Reeves can only watch, heart pounding in his throat, as the blade begins its deadly descent toward his neck. This is it. He braces himself for the final blow, a surge of regret and defiance flooding through him. The hidden power awakens. At that exact heartbeat, a brilliant golden light flares at the edge of Reeves' vision. The alien girl, collapsed nearby, suddenly lifts her head. Weak and barely conscious a moment ago, she now kneels with her slender hands pressed against the ground. Her body trembles as an otherworldly glow ignites in her eyes. Pure molten gold, blazing with panic and power. A low hum fills the air, and the very ground begins to tremble. The warrior's axe halts mid-swing. He hesitates, sensing something unnatural building around him. The air crackles with invisible energy. Pebbles and dust skitter across the ground. Tiny arcs of light flicker over the girl's skin, illuminating the intricate markings on her pale arms. It's as if some ancient force has awakened inside her, responding to her fear. Reeves, still pinned under the warrior's boot, watches in astonishment. He can feel the hairs on his arms rise. The static in the air is electric. The girl's face twists in confusion and distress. She doesn't understand what she's doing or how. Neither does Reeves. All he knows is that something powerful has been unleashed, and it's about to erupt. With a sudden cry, equal parts anguish and fury, the girl throws her arms outward. A shockwave of raw energy explodes from her in a blinding flash. The force hits like a tidal wave. Reeves feels a massive pressure slam into his chest, knocking the breath from his lungs. The alien warrior, caught at point-blank range, has no chance to resist. The shimmering blast hits him full-on and hurls him backwards as if he were a leaf in a storm. The warrior's grip on his axe is torn loose. His body sails through the air and crashes into the tangled undergrowth with a distant thud, snapping vines and branches as he disappears into the shadows. The axe clatters to the ground beside Reeves, its blade burying into the dirt only inches from his side. In an instant, the lethal threat looming over Reeves is gone. Silence falls, save for the ringing in Reeves' ears. The shockwave subsides, and the golden light around the girl dims to a soft glow. Small motes of energy drift in the air like glowing dust before fading away. Reeves lies stunned and gasping, his mind racing to catch up with what just happened. He's alive. Alive, when mere seconds ago death was certain. Aftermath. Fear and awe. Reeves pushes himself onto his elbows, chest heaving, where the towering warrior stood a moment ago. The alien girl now sways unsteadily on her feet. She had risen sometime after releasing that blast, but now her strength seems to be failing. Reeves scrambles up and rushes to her side just as her knees buckle. He catches her under the arm, gently supporting her before she can collapse. She is surprisingly light, and up close Reeves can see she's shaking from head to toe. A faint golden shimmer still flickers in her eyes. She stares down at her own trembling hands, disbelief etched on her face. It's as if she's not sure they belong to her. For an instant, neither of them speaks. They're both trying to comprehend the surge of power that just burst forth from this frightened girl. Reeves's heart is still hammering, but now with astonishment rather than fear. "You saved me," he manages to gasp, voice hoarse. The girl looks at him, eyes wide and wet with tears. She opens her mouth as if to respond, but no words come out. Instead, a small sob escapes, and she clings to Reeves' arm, fearful and unsteady. He wraps a supportive arm around her shoulders. "It's okay," he murmurs, though he's not sure she understands his language. His tone is gentle, trying to soothe the panic he sees rising in her. The golden glow in her eyes is already fading, and with it, her expression crumples into worry. Reeves realizes she's just as scared of what she did as she was of the warrior who tried to kill them. Her gaze darts to the destruction around them, the scorched earth radiating from where she stood, the smoking vines and leaves still settling from the blast. She doesn't understand this power that erupted from within. Neither does Reeves. In that brief moment, he had seen her transform from a vulnerable refugee into a being of immense, untamed power. And it terrified her. Reeves gently tilts her chin up so she'll meet his eyes. "You're okay," he says slowly, enunciating each word. He hopes his calm voice will cut through her fear. The girl nods faintly, though tears spill down her cheeks. Her golden eyes search his face for reassurance, and Reeves musters a small, encouraging smile. Despite the shock and the lingering adrenaline, gratitude floods through him. They are alive because of her. Their moment of fragile calm is abruptly broken by a sharp cry from the tree line. Reeves' head snaps up, every muscle tensing anew. At the edge of the clearing, two more of the tribal warriors emerge from behind mossy ruins, the remaining hunters, drawn by the commotion. They must have witnessed the shockwave from a distance. Now they step forward cautiously, weapons in hand, eyes darting between the unconscious axe-wielder sprawled in the jungle and the duo standing at the center of the clearing. Reeves quickly moves in front of the girl, shielding her with his body. He can feel her clutch the back of his tattered shirt, frightened. His own legs threaten to give out. He's battered and exhausted, but he refuses to let any harm come to her. The warriors do not attack immediately. Instead, they regroup, inching closer together as they circle warily. Their painted faces, which minutes ago showed savage confidence, are now twisted in confusion and fear. He can hear them muttering in their harsh alien tongue. They saw what the girl did. They fear her. One warrior, gripping a spear tightly, has a visible tremor in his hands. The other bares his teeth and shouts something, a challenge or a prayer. Reeves can't tell. They're scared, but cornered animals can be dangerous. Reeves knows if they charge, he and the girl are in no shape to withstand another fight like that. For a long moment, no one moves. The jungle seems to be holding its breath around them. The only sound is the crackle of a few burning leaves and the distant drip of water in the ancient temple ruins. Reeves feels the girl's fingers tighten on his arm. He steadies his stance, preparing for whatever happens next. His eyes lock on the warriors, and he silently dares them to come closer. An ancient threat stirs. Before anyone can make another move, a deep rumble rolls through the ground. It's faint at first, like distant thunder, but quickly intensifies into a bone-shaking tremor. Loose stones skitter down the sides of nearby ruins. The central stone monolith, covered in vines and alien carvings, shudders ominously. Everyone, Reeves, the girl, and the warriors, freezes in place, startled. Reeves' pulse, which had just begun to slow, spikes again. He shoots a quick glance at the girl. Her eyes are wide in alarm. She feels it too. The rumbling isn't coming from them, or the warriors. It's coming from beneath their feet. The girl presses closer against Reeves, a whimper of fear on her lips. The warriors back up a step, spinning around to scan the dark jungle, their bravado faltering further. All at once, the jungle comes alive with warning. Birds explode out of the treetops in a cacophony of screams, fleeing into the sky. Monkeys howl in the distance. A flock of nocturnal creatures spirals up from the ruins, disturbed from their roosts. The very air seems to tense with anticipation, as if the forest knows something big is coming. A loud crack splits the night as one of the ancient stone slabs near the altar splits in two. From deep within the exposed crevice, a hot gust of air escapes, carrying with it the stench of centuries-old dust and something fouler, something alive. Reeves staggers, struggling to keep his footing as the ground lurches again. The girl cries out and grabs his hand tightly. Even the warriors yelp in terror now, their formation broken as they stumble backward, eyes wide. Reeves's blood turns to ice. This quake isn't an aftershock from the girl's power. It's something else, something awakening in response. The ground falls quiet for a second that stretches unbearably long. Then a new sound emerges from below, a low, resonant growl, so deep he feels it vibrate through his bones. It doesn't sound like any animal Reeves has ever encountered. It resonates with an almost intelligent malice. Out of the darkness of the crumbling temple entrance, far behind the warriors, two pinpoints of burning red light flicker to life. Eyes. massive, inhuman eyes opening where there should be only blackness. Reeves feels the girl bury her face against his arm, trembling. He can't tear his gaze away from those awful lights. The remaining warriors slowly turn to see what he's staring at, and one of them screams at the sight. With a thunderous roar, an enormous shadow shifts in the depths of the ruin. Stone cracks and trees splinter as something colossal begins to drag itself freed from the earth. The sound is deafening, a mix of grinding rock and unearthly bellowing. In that instant, Reeves understands with dread certainty they have disturbed a far greater threat than a tribe of hunters. He takes a step back, keeping the girl behind him, every instinct yelling at him to run. Now, the warriors are already bolting into the jungle, their courage finally shattered as the ground heaves beneath them. But Reeves stands frozen, mesmerized by the towering silhouette emerging from the ruins. His mind races. How can they possibly survive this? The answer will have to wait. With one last quake and a shriek of ancient stone, the monstrous presence lunges into the moonlight. Reeves throws his arm up over his face, unsure whether to protect the girl or shield his own eyes from the blinding spray of debris. His heart thunders in pure terror. And then, blackness. An earth-shaking snarl fills the air as the true horror reveals itself. And everything goes painfully, shockingly blank. The final escape and a dark secret. The jungle was in chaos. The ground shook violently as something massive crawled out from the ancient ruins. A nightmare made of shadows and fire, its burning red eyes fixed on the living beings who had disturbed its slumber. The tribal warriors who once stood fearless had now become prey. They abandoned their weapons, their painted faces twisted in horror as they fled into the jungle, screaming in their guttural tongue. Their once powerful chants were now shrieks of terror. Reeves barely had time to react. The girl clung to his arm, her golden eyes wide with terror. Her small body trembled against him, the energy from her earlier outburst now completely drained. She had saved him once, but whatever was coming now, it was beyond both of them. The thing in the ruins let out a soundless roar, a deep, unnatural vibration that sent a pulse through the jungle. The trees bent away from it, their leaves shriveling. The air itself became heavy, thick with a presence that did not belong to this world. And then it moved. A massive, clawed limb dragged itself forward, scraping against the cracked stone. The temple crumbled under its weight. It was no longer a ruin. It was a grave being unearthed. Reeves didn't wait to see more. "Movie," he barked, gripping the girl's wrist as he took off into the jungle. Running from a god. The jungle had become a maze of shadows and falling debris. Trees cracked and splintered, their roots tearing free as the monster's presence distorted reality itself. Reeves sprinted, weaving through vines and fallen logs, his breath coming in sharp gasps. The girl stumbled, exhausted. Reeves scooped her up, carrying her as he pushed through the suffocating heat. His legs burned, his body screamed for rest. But stopping meant death. Behind them, the ruins fully collapsed. And from the wreckage, the monster rose. It was monstrous, yet shapeless, an abyss with form. Its skin was blacker than the night, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. But its eyes burned like twin suns, filled with endless hunger. It did not chase them like a predator. It moved like a force of nature, consuming everything in its path. And Reeves knew, with chilling certainty, that it wasn't just hunting them. It wanted the girl. A desperate stand. Reeves burst into a clearing, his mind racing for a plan. He couldn't outrun it forever. He couldn't fight it. But maybe, just maybe, he could outthink it. Ahead, the river from before came into view, now calmer, winding through a rocky canyon. A single fallen tree stretched across it, forming a natural bridge. Reeves didn't hesitate. He charged onto the log, feet slipping on the wet bark. The girl clutched his shoulders, too weak to move on her own. They were halfway across when the monster arrived. It stopped at the tree line, its glowing eyes locked onto them. Reeves dared to hope it wouldn't follow. That maybe, just maybe, it was bound to the ruins. Then it stepped forward. The ground beneath it withered instantly. The trees behind it shriveled into ash, the river's edge turning black as if the very life had been drained from the earth. It was coming. Reeves knew what he had to do. The final choice. One shot. He still had one bullet left. And if he timed it right. Reeves set the girl down and raised his rifle. He aimed not at the monster, but at the log beneath their feet. The girl gasped, clutching his sleeve. She knew what he was about to do. "Hold on," Reeves whispered. Then he pulled the trigger. The fall into the unknown. The bullet struck the log's weakest point. With a loud crack, the bridge gave way. The girl screamed as they plunged into the river below. Cold water swallowed them whole, dragging them beneath the surface. Reeves fought against the current, clutching the girl as the river tore them away from the nightmare above. From beneath the water, he saw it, the monster standing at the edge of the cliff, watching them disappear. It did not roar. It did not follow. Instead, it waited, like it knew this wasn't over, like it was patient, and that terrified Reeves more than anything. The journey's end, or a new beginning. Reeves gasped for air as they finally washed up on the riverbank, coughing up water. The girl lay beside him, barely conscious, but alive. For a moment, neither of them moved. Just breathing. Just surviving. Then, Reeves sat up, running a hand through his soaked hair. The jungle around them was quieter now. Unnaturally so. They had escaped. But for how long? The girl stirred, weak fingers gripping his sleeve. And then she spoke, clearly, in his language. "They will come for me," she whispered. Reeves froze. She had barely been able to speak before. But now she was making sense. He turned to her, his heart hammering. "Who?" She blinked, her golden eyes filled with something new. Understanding. Fear. Resignation. "The ones who made me." The word sent a chill down Reeves' spine. Because he knew, deep down, this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning.